Can you tell what these people are thinking using only body language? Let's find out. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey and I use my degree in Sociology and Psychology, my certifications in Criminal Interrogation and Body Language Analysis, and over 10 years experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. This week, we're shifting gears and doing something totally different that I've had on my to-do list for a while, and I'm really excited about, based on a YouTube channel that I've mentioned before, but we've never really looked at on the channel. The channel is called Trybals, and it's a group of tribal individuals who react to products, videos, and music from the Western world. Now, what's really interesting about these individuals is, if you look at some of the things they're reacting to, you realize just how disconnected they are from our world, because there are things that are very much part of pop culture here in the Western world that they have no exposure to. In my studies on nonverbal communication, whether it was in university or outside of school, there have always been two types of studies that I find particularly fascinating and important. The first category is research that was done on individuals who were born blind. There are a lot of great studies in social psychology, namely some great research by David Matsumoto on individuals who are born blind and how they express emotions non-verbally. And this is so vital because it allows us to know which emotions are innate to human beings. The second type of research are the studies that were done cross-culturally and more specifically in tribes that are very disconnected from the Western world. And once again, the reason for this is whatever expressions of emotion we see that are common with the Western world, we know that there's a high chance that they're universal and innate to human beings. And that's exactly why I love the YouTube channel Trybals. Because when we see these individuals reacting to things, but we have no idea what they're saying, we could still see in their facial expressions or nonverbal gestures things that look exactly the same here in the Western world. And this gives us an idea as to which nonverbal expressions are much more universal and therefore reliable. Similarly, very often in the videos that they're watching, they pick up on certain emotions and they go, oh, I think this person is feeling such and such, or they're thinking such and such. And that again allows us to know which expressions are universal, because these individuals who are very disconnected from the Western world are still understanding the emotions that they're seeing in these videos, even if they don't speak the language at all. Now, although they have a lot of interesting reaction videos, in this analysis, we're going to focus on their reaction to the song Hallelujah by Pentatonix, one of my favorite musical groups. Now, for those of you who don't know, Pentatonix is a very popular acapella group. In other words, they harmonize, but there's no instruments. They do all the harmonies with their own voices and with their bodies, sometimes for the percussion. Now, for copyright purposes, I can't play long stretches of the music or of the video. So for those of you who want to see the whole thing uninterrupted, whether you do it now or at the end of this video, I really encourage you to go check it out. Unbroken, uninterrupted, the whole thing. It's really wonderful. It's a great song, it's a great music video, very heartfelt, and it's a great reaction video as well, which we will see in this video, but cut up into smaller parts, and sometimes I have to mute the music. But anyways, before we look at their reaction to the video, let's do a bit of baselining. So we're gonna see some clips here of them communicating to the host, to the camera, and it gives us a chance to see how they communicate non-verbally. Let's take a look.
चमचों से म्यूजिक सुनी, हड्डियों से सुनी, हेवी मेटल सुना, बेड जोरिक सुना, गले से आवाज सुनी, तो आज आपको थोड़ी डिफरेंट
और पता नहीं क्या है भाई।
ता जो आने अगे आला चप्पलन दा म्यूजिक बुधाई आला छा, हान ता अंदाजो क्यों अजर छाती म्यूजिक हुंदी।
क्या खबर कोने म्यूजिक जी।
ये आज नई चीज देखने को मिली है, नए दोस्त देखने को मिले हैं। ये एक हमारे लिए सरप्राइज होता है।
माको चमचो कांटो को ठक ठक वाली का शई कोने। ज़बानी आवाज से जो 5 जना ग्रुप में
जी
ये दसिंग आई ना आयो
ना गाइन ना आयो सिंगिंग अलग है, गायन आवाज है। हां पर वो म्यूजिक जो आवाज बेचे।
अच्छा ना आयो कुछ काने खाली गाय पियो म्यूजिक जवाज।
हूं एकड़ो बैंड आ उन नालो पेंटाटोनिक्स। टॉनिक्स काफी जो मशहूर गाने होते हैं ना, उनके वो कवर सॉन्ग करते हैं। मतलब उनको उनके जो म्यूजिक है वो चलाते हैं, लेकिन खास बात ये है कि उनके पास कोई इंस्ट्रूमेंट नहीं होगा म्यूजिक।
I actually want to start by talking about one of the most misquoted and misunderstood studies in all of social psychology. So we've all heard this fun little statistic before.
60% of all human communication is nonverbal body language. 30% is your tone. So that means that 90% of what you're saying ain't coming out of your mouth.
I've heard that statement in so many movies, TV shows, articles, websites, and they're all wrong. The research that this quote is referencing was conducted by Albert Mehrabian, who I've always felt connected to because we're both Armenian, but that's besides the point. He definitely did not suggest that 90% of all communication is nonverbal. If that were the case, we could all just walk into board meetings in a language that we don't speak and understand most of what's being said. But we can't. What he did find is that 55% of what we communicate is body language, 38% is in our tone, and 7% in our words, but only in conversations about emotions and attitudes. That's it. So if in that same board meeting, the CEO got really upset about the numbers and started communicating how angry he is, almost anyone, even if you don't speak the language, would be able to understand that he's upset about something, what he's feeling, his attitude, but not the content of the words. Because the nonverbal communication of a lot of emotions and attitudes are universal, which is why emojis work all over the world, but this does not apply to all types of conversations, only emotional ones. So that's what makes this baseline really fascinating, because if we didn't have the subtitles, we really wouldn't know most of what's being talked about. There are little moments where we see things that we go, okay, that looks like something that I recognize, but a lot of it is just conversational. So let's take a look at some of the things that we do recognize just in this beginning conversation. So let's start with a gentleman where we are seeing quite a bit of nonverbal communication, and his name is Muharram. I hope I'm saying that right. And he's being told, on the history of this channel, you've seen all kinds of stuff. You've seen throat singing and spoons used as instruments, and he's being told some of the stuff he's seen before. And in that segment, we see him perk up 3 times. The first time as he perks up, we see his hands that are on the table like this, open up like this. As he perks up, his eyes open up as well, and his eyebrows move up just a little bit. So everything's opening up like this. Now, perking up, especially with the eyes opening up, is very consistent with surprise or excitement. Like when we're expecting something, we tend to perk up like this. The hands would make sense with that as well, right? Because when we're curious or inquisitive, we might tend to go like, what is it? What's going on? And we might perk up with that. Like, what is it? I'm excited. What's going on here? So if I saw something like that in the Western culture, I would assume it has something to do with excitement, even a little bit of surprise. But then as the interviewer says, throat singing, he does it again, but this time it's more contained. So his hands are like this, he perks up again, the fingers open up again, but the hands don't quite separate, and the eyes aren't opening up much either. So it happens twice in succession where we see this perking up. Then it happens a 3rd time, and this time he says what he's thinking. So it happens a 3rd time where he perks up again, this time on a bit of an angle, but again, the fingers kind of open up again. The eyes aren't quite opening up, but it's that same perking up as the first 2, and this time he says, I'm curious, like you're making me curious. So this gives us insight as to what this might be. It could be excitement and curiosity. The next one is also really fascinating. His name is Mukhtiar, and I hope I'm saying that right. And the first part of when he's being talked to and he's kind of responding is a perfect example that 90% of communication is not nonverbal, because there's no way for anyone who doesn't speak the language to know what he's experiencing or talking about there. He's just sitting there very stoic and just listening to what's being told. So there's no way for us to know. But towards the end of that, all of a sudden we see his eyes go to his left and start searching, and then he speaks as he gestures no with his head. Now this was a really great moment to see, because in most cultures, and very much in Western civilization, typically this means no and this means yes. That's pretty universal, but there are exceptions. Notably in Bulgaria, this is a way to say yes. There are other areas of Europe and the Middle East where this indicates yes and this means no. I also know that in certain areas of India and Pakistan, the same thing applies, where this means no and this means yes. I have such a hard time saying that as I do this. Now, the Trybals are from a tribal community who hail from Sindh, Pakistan. So I was very interested to know if there's any differences there. And if, this might mean yes or this might mean no. But in that case, it felt like he's scanning and then he's saying no to something. And if we look at the subtitles, he is saying, I have no idea what we're about to see today. So it's nice to see that this, in their culture, still means no. Then we have Mohammed and Abdul. And if you were to watch any one of those 2 without the subtitles in this segment, most of us would have no clue what they could possibly be saying. I mean, Muhammad has a couple of slow blinks in there as though he's emphasizing something with those eyes, but there's really nothing concrete in terms of nonverbal communication to hang on to with him. And then Abdul is generally very stoic. It doesn't help that there's a very big beard hiding a lot of what's going on in the lower face, but you're going to see in the reaction segment of this and on other videos on their channel, you rarely get a lot from him. Every now and then he surprises you with something, but it's rare. One thing that is interesting with Abdul is right at the end when he's told that this is a group with 5 members who are going to be singing, we hear him say something and he says, ni, and he goes like this, and he doesn't translate at the bottom what that means or what it says. If I had to assume, I would assume that it's some sort of confirmation of understanding. Like he's going, got it, gotcha. That's what this is. Okay. Because we know that this is no, it makes sense that this would mean yes, and I think he's just confirming that he got it. That's what I would think. Then we have Parvati and Lakshmi, and there's a couple of things that are really interesting about them. One is that very often when they're talking, Lakshmi will turn to Parvati and they smile. And there's what we call confirmation glances. And this is something we very often see with 2 individuals in an interview where they check in on each other and just kind of synchronize the message. It's also really interesting that towards the end, we again see these up and down gestures from Lakshmi, and she says something like Ache at the end, and she does that same thing, and that translates to I see, like I get it. And it's very similar to that head gesture that Abdul did earlier right at the end of his segment, where he just bobbed his head downwards like this, and this is just going to confirm to me that that was also some sort of confirmation of understanding. Then we go back to Muharram and we see something that is really interesting for me. So as he's being told what this is, what the band does, you know, they're a cappella, they sing with their voice, we see a couple of things. First, we see a lean in with a smile. And this is something that is extremely common to all of them. In moments of interest or curiosity, we see this lean in, which isn't specific to this tribe. We see this pretty much anywhere in the world. When something gets our attention, we lean in, we might even turn our ear, might even squint to see better because it gets our attention. But immediately after that, we see a couple of behaviors in succession. He makes fists and he pops them down on the table like this as he goes, ooh, like this. And there's a bit of a hint of a smile in that moment. And that smile, I think, is so important. Because here's the thing. In most cases, if in an interaction, I'm talking to someone and I all of a sudden see those fingers go inwards and nothing changes in the face, just this, in most cases, that's not a positive thing. Things come inwards when we're being protective or when we feel vulnerable. And especially with those fingers, it's not just protective, but it might be the mind thinking of a confrontation. Now, there is an exception to this, and it's a fist made in moments of celebration or strength. So think of a singer who hits a high note, and they might do this to summon some strength for that high note, or an athlete who scores a goal, and you see this kind of celebration, like, yes! But that's intense, right? It's a moment of power and strength. At the very same time with him, we see an eye block as he turns his head away, and we see this ooh kind of gesture. Now, this also could very well be negative. Think about, completely out of context, in total silence, seeing someone suddenly make 2 fists down on the table and go ooh like this. That could very well be someone telling him something sad or tragic and him going ooh, like turning away from it, closing the eyes. This is pretty universal to try to focus on something else, get away from that. But I think that very subtle hint of a smile as he's doing that changes the entire meaning of that, because now it's no longer oof, it's more of a ooh. And like we kind of, it's a hint, but we see that it's not a negative experience. So this to me actually looks a lot like if you're in a restaurant and you look at a waiter explaining to a table something really special that the chef prepared that night. You might see someone do that kind of thing where they go, ooh, that sounds good. Oh, that's a good one. So there is an intensity to this. There is a power to this, but I think it's more along the lines of like excitement, of something that he's looking forward to diving into. But it's dangerously close to something that I may have thought is a negative experience. So it's really interesting to see how there are nuances that might throw me off. Okay, now we've seen a little bit of baseline behaviors. We've seen who's reactive, who's non-reactive, and we've definitely seen some nonverbal communication that's very similar to what we see in Western society. But now we're gonna watch them actually react to the Pentatonix music video to see what emotions they're communicating that are very recognizable to us And are there some that are completely throwing us off? But before we do me a huge favor, hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on for more behavioral analysis and practical psychology content. Also, once again, I will be muting parts of the music video for copyright purposes, but I will unmute areas where the Trybals are saying something or areas where the music is something that they're reacting to and you might want to hear what it is they're reacting to, but it might just be a little choppy because of copyright.
I've heard there was a secret chord. Don't really care for music, do you? The minor fall, the major lift.
Okay, so we start here with Muharram, who is doing something very recognizable, where he's rubbing his hands together like this. And this is something we see pretty much all over the world, and there are variations of it. And some people call this hand rubbing, some call it hand wringing or hand washing, and sometimes it looks, like this, and sometimes it's just like this. And typically, when we see this kind of gesture, it suggests plotting something, planning something, or being excited about something. So essentially it's looking to the future and thinking about something, but usually there's some sort of excitement or thrill with that. We also see a lean in from him after the hand rubbing, but it's not just a lean in, because again, leaning in shows interest. We also see, if we look at his head and his eyes, he's scanning the whole screen. Like we could see him looking around. This is getting his interest because he's seeing in the music video, okay, there's one guy, then there's four guys behind him. So he's trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here? So we see this interest. We also see a very quick scrunching around the nose, and it's on both sides because we even see the left cheek subtly going up like this. Now, this kind of scrunching typically happens with two things. One is a negative feeling towards something. So like with disgust or anger, we see this kind of scrunching, but also we see it in curiosity when we're curious about something or inquisitive about something. So listen, in this case, it's more likely to be that, given the excitement, given the lean in, looking around. So I think that's just him taking it all in. Then we go to Parvati and Lakshmi, and we see Parvati saying something positive, right? So she's listening, and then we see a smile on her face, and she says something positive. It doesn't translate. I don't know what she's saying, but it appears to be positive. Then she turns to Lakshmi for her input on this, and if you look at Lakshmi, she registers, she hears it, and she nods in agreement, but her eyes are still on the screen. So it's holding her interest, right? Because we get a lot of confirmation glances from these two. They're often looking at each other to, again, present a combined narrative, but in this case, although she's agreeing and registering, it's not breaking her focus. Another thing that suggests interest or focus universally is a low blink rate, when we don't blink very often. In fact, the research on this shows that there are two scenarios that very consistently produce a low blink rate. One is focus. When we're focused on something, we don't want to blink because we don't want to miss any of it. And the other is when we're daydreaming, when we're kind of just not focused. So almost the opposite of that, the blink rate tends to drop. Now, I have watched quite a few videos of the Trybals, and Lakshmi's blink rate does vary a lot. There are times where she has a very standard, more or less average blink rate, but there are times when she's watching something or focused on something, that blink rate does drop quite a bit. This is a really good example of that. Then we have Abdul and Muhammad, who are pretty much the kryptonite of a body language analyst because we're getting nothing. They're just sitting there, just looking at the screen. And for Abdul, this is pretty much going to be the rest of this reaction video. He's not going to move much from that position. But, it is what it is.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Okay, lots going on that one. So once again, we start with Muharram, and right in the beginning, he's taken aback, right? So something's going on and he backs up like this. And if we look at his face, eyebrows are down, the corners of the mouth are downwards. So again, I know it's really hard to completely detach ourselves from what we're doing here, but forget the clip, forget that we know what he's watching. If you showed me just that reaction and said non-verbally, what does this moment suggest? I wouldn't necessarily go to positive. He's taken aback by something. So I would say, okay, something that's, surprising, maybe shocking, but I would lean a little bit more towards negative in that moment because we're not seeing this, whoa, like this smile. Now, it is important to reintroduce context once we've seen the behaviors. So even if in this moment, if we saw that on silent, we would say, okay, he's taken aback and it's not necessarily positive. It's important to remember that sometimes movies or music or art that have a sad feeling to them even if we like it, even if we connect with it, for some people who are very empathetic, we do see signs of sadness on their face because they're connecting with the sad message. Now, when we do cut back to him, after we see a few other tribals, we see the same, the head kicks back again, but this time we add two things to that help us a lot. One is the hand turning upwards, right? So he's got his hand on the desk like this, and as he goes back, the hand turns upwards. The other one is the eyes. They flutter in that exact moment. So he's taken aback when now we're fluttering with the hand moving upwards. Now there's a lot of research on hand orientation, and we know that it's not universal. Different cultures orient their hands in different directions when they communicate. But there are two, actually more like 1.5 orientations that seem to have universal meaning. One we talk a lot on the channel is palm outwards. Almost everywhere in the world, this is a negation or stop or trying to get someone's attention. But palms upwards also seems to have a universal meaning. Now, in some cultures, people just gesture like this to communicate normally. Not all cultures, but some. Like in the French culture, we see this a lot in normal communication. But when the hands turn palm upwards, it's often either some sort of exchange, like I'm going to give you something, or I'm asking you for something, or a lack of knowing something, like having no information. Which makes a lot of sense when we think about that in shrugs. When we shrug, very often those hands come up. And you guys know that I love all the research on shrugging, and shrugging often denotes a lack of something. So if I'm telling you, I don't know, I might shrug with everything, or I might just, my hand might go, I don't know. So in this moment, we have taken aback, we have the hand going upwards like this, and the eye flutter. And the research on eye fluttering tells us that we do this when we're accessing memory, either committing something to memory or retrieving something from memory. So when we're processing. So this makes a lot of sense, right? He's taken aback, hand going up, like, oh, wow, like I don't know what this is. And he's processing. He's trying to understand, what am I looking at here? And this is happening at the exact moment where those harmonies kick in. So he's taking it in. Then of course we have Abdul, who I think in this case we could have just put a picture of Abdul in that chair and it would have been more or less the same thing. So still nothing from Abdul. And then we have Parvati and Lakshmi, who seem to have a role reversal here almost, because Parvati is looking at the screen and her blink rate is normal, so she's not like dead focused. But Lakshmi is saying something, and this time she turns. She turns to say, oh, look how nice. And we see the smile. We see it's very nice about the music, right? And we see Parvati acknowledge, but she's still looking at the screen. So it's holding her interest to a certain degree because she's not breaking contact.
हाँ, इसमें कोई गिटार, कोई ड्रम, कोई चीज मतलब कुछ भी नहीं है।
ये पेन जमात में कहन पे।
गानों का नहीं पे लगे माना था कौन पे बताया। गानों छापे महसूस थे केड़े किस्म जो है दुख और गमगीन है या खुशी और है या
गमगीन लगी
गमगीन पे लगे ना म्यूजिक में कवर बजी हुई ना हालांकि माना तो कौन बताई
नहीं
सादा बगैर गुस्से का यकीन हिंगे चलो वराणुआ धुना देंगे कहूँ खरंगे ये दिखणगे।
मैं वही तो बड़े गौर से देख रहा हूँ ना इसको।
ये एज ग्रुप ऐसा नहीं है, मतलब ये काफी पुरानी एक तरीका है, चर्च में ऐसा गाते थे।
अच्छा,
उनसे इन्होंने मुतासर होकर अपने स्टाइल में जो नए गाने अच्छे वाले मशहूर गाने इनकी जुबान के, उनको इन्होंने अपने अंदाज में पेश किया है।
Once again, we start with Muharram, and this time he's asking, are these noises coming from their mouths? Like, is this human? And he's being told it is. And we could tell this time, because of the subtitles, but also the nonverbal communication, that as he's being taken aback again with that same gesture, and what do we see this time? We see an eyebrow flash. So really quickly, again as he's taken back, we see the eyebrows go up. And remember, those eyebrows, emphasis, surprise, and in this case, I think that's what it is, it's surprise. He's surprised that this is coming from human vocals. And now, within that context, with the taken aback and the eyebrow flash, we start to understand this gesture of him backing up a little bit more. Now, I don't know if this is culture specific or if it's specific to just this individual, but it seems that for him, when we're getting that taken aback, it is a positive realization. It is surprising, because in this case, he's quite impressed, and we're seeing that same gesture plus the eyebrow flash this time. Then we go to the women, and I think there's something interesting here, because they're asking, like, what are you getting from the tone of this? And Parvati says that she feels that it's sad. There's something sad about this. And if we look at Lakshmi, we're not seeing enormous agreement, right? When Parvati says it's sad, we're not seeing Lakshmi go, yeah, I agree, that's what it is. In fact, we see her kind of turn away and look back at the screen. I think there's a part of Lakshmi who's not that sure that this is sad, which would explain why she looks back at the screen, like trying to see like, okay, where did you see sad in that? As opposed to going, yeah, I agree with this. I don't know if it's that for sure, because we're not getting much from her, but I would expect that because they're so in sync, because she checks in with her a lot, that if there was synchronicity on that, we would see more strong agreement. Like, yes, I agree, it's sad. Instead, we see not much commentary and it's kind of looking back at the screen. And by the way, although I can't back this up with research, it is quite common in my experience that when two people are being asked about something and one offers an opinion and the other one doesn't quite agree, they'll look back at the thing to be like, okay, let me see if I see that same thing. Then we cut to Abdul, who's just giving us the facts, right? He's going, the one guy's singing and the other ones are doing the backing track, and he's just telling us literally what's happening. And that's, again, a great example of what we were talking about earlier. If you were to just show me that without subtitles, I would have absolutely no clue what he's saying. There's zero communication of emotion. I still can't tell with the subtitles, does he like it? Does he dislike it? He's just giving us the facts. You'll notice Muhammad is doing a lot of stuff around the mouth. So a lot of grooming that beard and rubbing on the sides of the mouth like this. And this typically does fall into the category of stressful behavior if it's off baseline. So if I'm talking to someone for an hour and we're not seeing any of those gestures, all of a sudden I ask about a certain topic and we're seeing all kinds of mouth blocking and what we call grooming, grooming the facial hair or something like this, I might wonder why this is happening all of a sudden. But for Muhammad, this is very much baseline. Not just in this video, in other videos of the Trybals, he does this kind of thing a lot. When he's reflecting, when he's watching, when he's thinking, it's very common. So that's not giving me much. He does call it unnatural as well. And I'm wondering if this is a translation thing, like he used a word that doesn't have a direct translation, that's just the best word for it. But also I wonder if by unnatural, he means like something about it isn't natural, like almost in a negative way, or is it a positive thing like it doesn't seem normal? I'm a mentalist, right? I'm a magician and I perform things that are seemingly impossible. So often when someone's mind is blown, they might say something like, that is not normal, that's abnormal, that shouldn't happen, that's unnatural. So these kinds of words, and I wonder if he means it that way, but there's something about the nonverbal communication at this point that makes me think that no, I think he's having a hard time like kind of accepting or understanding this, because even as the guy explains to him that there's a lot of people who do this, we're not seeing curiosity or, oh, okay, wow, okay, what's really impressive. He's just kind of, okay, I see, very normal, very neutral. So in terms of nonverbal communication, again, it could be a cultural difference. That's the whole point of this video, but I'm not seeing enormous positivity from a gentleman that I've seen in other videos smile and have more positive reactions. And at the end, we get a glimmer of positivity from Muhammad because, first of all, his position has changed. Whereas earlier he was sitting back quite a bit, now he's leaned in more towards the screen, and we are seeing a smile in his face. And they're harmonizing in that moment, and he does start once again kind of bobbing his head a little, and we even see his thumb kind of drumming on the table.
ये लगा कि ये कुछ महसूस कराना चाहते हैं इन अपने अल्फाज में.
I love that moment. My regular viewers probably guessed that I love that moment because as the music is getting intense, and Kirsten, the female member of Pentatonix, has a very powerful, emotional voice, we see Mukhtiar, he almost emotes almost like uncontrollably, goes, no, it's sad. Like it immediately hits him. And if you look at the music video in that moment, Kirsten is singing. She often has a subtle smile as she sings, but in that moment, her eyebrows do exactly what eyebrows do universally in moments of sadness. And that's where the corners of the eyebrows go upwards like this. And the beauty of this is very few people can fake this. So we know when we see this kind of thing, when people are expressing sadness, often that it's pretty legitimate because not everyone could get just the inner corners of the eyebrows to go up while the outer corners stay down. Usually when we try to do this, the whole thing moves. You're trying it, aren't you? A lot of people, when they hear me say that, try to do it to see if they could do it. And I always have some comments of people going, oh, I could totally do it, it's super easy. Yeah, some people can, but it's not everyone who has the ability to do that. Regardless though, it doesn't matter, because in that moment as she's singing, I guess she feels that music and it happens for a moment. It's subtle, but those inner corners go up. And Mukhtiar catches that. The tone, the face, the expression, he's getting this moment of sadness. And if we listen to the lyrics of what's being said, it's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. These are sad lyrics, but he doesn't understand those. He doesn't know what those words mean, but through her expression, he's sensing that there's something emotionally sad here. And I love that moment as well because we see Muharram doing a bunch of things that we saw before, one very consistently, which is the being taken aback. And again, we see the hands coming, separating and going up like this. And this time we see a smile as he's singing and moving along. And now we get the subtitle, which is he's saying, wow. So I think this pretty much locks it in, that this taking aback for him, it is a positive thing. It's when he's blown away by something. And even if at first it was just that, and we weren't seeing the smile, we weren't seeing those hands, sometimes those came in, this gesture is something that he does when he's really amazed by something. And we're really seeing it here. And then of course we have Abdul. And if ever you are going to be interrogated by someone and you don't want them to know what you're thinking, what you're feeling, contact Abdul and get a crash course. Get just a quick masterclass on how to resist interrogation, because this man is stoic. I have no idea. I have no idea. He might hate it. He might love it. I don't know.
God above, but all I've ever learned from love.
हाँ ये दर्द वाली है इसकी यार.
Okay, something fascinating happening here. For those of you who aren't familiar with Pentatonix, the one we're hearing there, his name is Mitch. And although online he's described as a tenor, to me sounds a lot more like a countertenor or someone who uses his head voice or his falsettos really, really effectively. Because very often he is in the highest register of all of them, even higher than Kirsten. So they have a lot of songs where he's really hitting those high pitches and it's super clean. What's really particular about this is that that tone that he's able to go to is probably very rarely heard in men in a lot of cultures. So in the beginning we see Mukhtiar, we see a very obvious lean in, he's looking at it, and then he turns his ear to it. And this is universal. This is when, again, lean in for interest. When we turn our ear to something, it's like even more interest. Like, what am I hearing here? And I think he's like really impressed by it. He's like, whoa, is this coming out of a guy? That's a really impressive high octave. Then Muhammad says that they've worked really hard. And again, it's interesting because it's not a testament to how much he likes it personally. It's a testament to how hard they've worked. So he's, again, he's leaned in, so there's some interest, there's a smile. So it's a little more positive than it was before, but that's an interesting compliment. It's not, I'm really enjoying this. It's they've worked hard. So again, I'm not feeling that this is his favorite. And I'll concede, as always, that this could be a cultural difference, but I'm just not getting the sense that of all the things I've seen him in, this is personally one of his favorites. And then we see something from Muharram that we haven't seen since the beginning, where as he talks about the pain that the singer is feeling, his hand goes to his chest like this in a fist, as he talks about the concept of pain. Then as he's watching, we see him bite the bottom lip, and any kind of tension around the mouth, biting, compressing, it's usually we're holding something in, holding something back. But immediately after that, we see his hand go into fists down on the table as he eye blocks, closes his eyes, and we see this scrunching in the face, like this. And we're getting context here. He's being emotionally affected by this, and he feels the pain that he perceives in the singer, and we're seeing this, this kind of moment where things close in and the fists come down. And I'm thinking back to, those fists in moments of strength or power. And we go back to the beginning when he was told that he was going to see this acapella video, and we saw that fist as he went, ooh, with that smile. We can almost tell that if we go back to that, he was foreseeing that this would be emotionally powerful, because it was the same gesture as we're seeing here as he's expressing the emotional power of this. This is why I love nonverbal communication. Sometimes you see something and you get that context, the person says what it is, and it's a lot more clear in this moment, and it lends meaning to that same gesture having happened earlier when it wasn't very sure what we were seeing in that moment.
जो ज़बान साईं बात सां सॼो म्यूज़िक पिया ठाहिनि ऐं ॻाइनि
सही लॻो तव्हांखे?
हाँ सही तमामु बेहतरीन।
अच्छी तरह इन्होंने भी बड़ी मेहनत की है इस ग्रुप ने, अपने मुंह से, सांस से, मेहनत करके इन्होंने पाँव से, हाथों से ये सॉन्ग बनाया है और सॉन्ग की कमी महसूस भी नहीं हुई।
ये भी अच्छा है, बहुत अच्छा है। और वो तो चलो जो शोर शराबा होता है वो तो ढोलकों से, और इनका तो इनके पास कुछ भी नहीं, और फिर भी अच्छा है। देखो कितना अच्छा कर रहे थे।
उस्ताद कामयाब है, हमारा शागिर्द कामयाब है। उस्ताद इसलिए हमारा शागिर्द पर कुछ कामयाबी ये तो तालीम मैंने सीखा खाना
बजाण में वो सुठो तो थी दे स्टाइल उनजो सुठो ईअं पेर खे कयो ऐं ईअं वॼायो वो ऐं आवाज़ उनजी सुठी जे पहिरीं आयो।
Okay, just a couple of quick notes on their reactions, where they're saying what they felt about the music. I think it's very much in line with what we saw in the nonverbal communication. So we have Mukhtiyar saying how amazing it was, which is very much in line with what we saw. You know, that smile, those eyebrow flashes, that emotional impact that he had, very much in line with the nonverbal communication. We have Muhammad, who, if you listen to what he's complimenting specifically, he's complimenting the hard work. So he's saying, I loved what? Their hard work. So again, I think he's trying to find the positivity. I think there are elements of this he connected with. I think he sees the talent there, but I'm not entirely sure that he emotionally connected with it as deeply as some of the other individuals. Then we have Abdul, who's just talking about the importance of a good teacher, right? They must have had a really good teacher. And again, just sticking to the facts, I have absolutely no idea if he loved this, hated it, was neutral on it, don't know. And then we have the women who, again, you don't need me for this. We see this in pretty much every culture. There's this giddiness, there's a bounciness. They're laughing, they're looking at each other. It's that high school clique vibe, that excitement. You could walk into pretty much any high school, college, mall in the continent of America, and you will see that kind of excitement, that togetherness. Very common with girl best friends or sisters or just any group of women that are really close, that kind of excitement. We're enjoying this thing together, they're checking in on each other, and nobody on this planet needs me to explain that. But the most interesting for me in those reactions at the end is Muharram, because the words that he's saying match what we saw, right? We saw him being taken aback. We saw him being impressed, at a loss of words. We saw those flutters in the beginning as he was processing, but eventually started singing along and really showing that emotional connection. But if we watch this segment where he's talking about it and we put it on mute and we have no idea what he's talking about the entire time, it's not blatantly obvious that he's talking about something positive. I mean, we see the eyebrows down, and I think there's a lot of like him trying to process it, and it was really interesting to him. I understand that within context, but if I didn't know what he was saying and I just had to look at the nonverbal, I would have no clue that he's talking about something positive in that moment. I would when it was actually happening with the reactions, but not as he's talking about it in this moment. And I thought that was so fascinating. And I think it's very clear why I find this entire channel so fascinating, because as you saw in this one example, there are moments where we're seeing things that look the same pretty much everywhere in the world, and we instantly know what it is. You can mute it and we'll know exactly what it is. But then there are moments that look a little different, and then there are moments that just don't seem positive at all. And it's really, really hard to know. Is it the culture? Is it the individual? Or is it just the moment? In that moment, they just don't happen to have expressed it the way that at a different time they may have. But nonetheless, it was such a blast for me to go through this, and it's always a blast to watch your content, and I encourage you to do it as well, to try to learn more about what is universal, not only in what we see on them, but what they see in the videos that they're watching. So let me know in the comments what you thought about this, if you would like to see more things along these lines, and I will see you on the next one.